And welcome back to Office Hours Live. Woo! Thank you. Thousands here in my office here in Berkeley. You're live. I'm alive, notwithstanding we are about to enter in a few weeks the age of Donald Trump. And Dolly Parton, still haven't heard from you. I hope you voted correctly, though. I don't know. Dolly, just tell me you did, please. Today we're going to go over a couple of things, but please do share this because, again, we're live and we want to take advantage of the fact that this is a live broadcast, if you will, but it's a live interchange because I'll be taking your questions in just a moment. But first, before your questions, just a couple of things we need to go over today about what's happening in terms of Trump land and what's going on right now. Right now, Hillary Clinton is ahead of Donald Trump. Now, the reason this keeps on going up, this is 2,645,046 votes. And the reason this keeps on going up is because more and more votes are coming in. They are coming in from areas where there are, still votes being counted. They're coming in from foreign ballots. And this number, interestingly, is much higher than even was estimated just a week ago. And this is, again, more than 5 times the margin that Al Gore had over George W. Bush in 2000. This is a big number, folks, which obviously raises the question about recounts and the Electoral College and everything else. Recounts, Michigan, Donald Trump was ahead before the recount by only 0.2%. There is a recount proceeding slowly. Wisconsin, there is definitely a recount already underway. Originally, Donald Trump was 0.7% ahead. The big problem is Pennsylvania. There is a legal challenge. The Trump people obviously don't want any recounts. There is a legal challenge. The Green Party has gone into court, federal court, and wants a recount. It's got to be done pretty quickly because by December 13th, a week from today, the electors in most states have to make their final decisions, have to file the final certificates with their secretaries of state, who in turn files those certificates with the federal government. And so there is only a very, very small window here of opportunity. But I wanted to bring to your attention one thing. Even so, there is the possibility, even without the recount, that electors could possibly find through their own consciences that Donald Trump doesn't deserve to be a president because he violates the Constitution, violates the meaning. The whole purpose of having an electoral college and not a popular vote, after all, historically, was to maintain the quality of the presidency, making sure there's no demagogues that get elected and so on. But I thought it was interesting in this regard. This is a fellow, I'm going to use red because he is a red state elector, Christopher Suprin from Texas. This is an elector who was supposed to vote for Donald Trump. Yesterday, he said publicly, and I'm going to quote what Christopher Suprin said. Remember, this is a Donald Trump elector. He said, "The United States was set up as a republic. Alexander Hamilton provided a blueprint for states' votes. Federalist 68," now he's referring back to the Federalist. These are documents that originally kind of explain what the founders of the Constitution really had in mind. Federalist 68 argued that an electoral college should determine if candidates are qualified, not engaged in demagoguery, and independent from foreign influence. Mr. Trump shows us again and again that he does not meet these standards. Given his own public statements, it isn't clear how the Electoral College can ignore these issues, and so it should reject him. Christopher Suprin, a Texas Trump Electoral College elector, has decided he's going to vote instead for Hillary Clinton. Well, maybe there are others out there. Maybe Mr. Suprin is going to show the way. By the way, on that issue of character and qualifications and foreign governments, there are more and more conflicts of interest between Donald Trump and his supposed interest in being president and representing the interests of the United States and everybody else out there in the world. I mean, it's ironic. He is running and has run on a nationalist platform, and he keeps on talking about making America great again and making American nationalism the most important thing. Donald Trump has interests all over the world that are already impinging on his decision-making, or it looks that way. For example, last Friday, Donald Trump had a discussion with the president of Taiwan on the telephone. This is the first time in 40 years that an American president has talked to a president of Taiwan, and this ruffled feathers. It did worse in China. Now, was it worth jeopardizing the relationship with China, or at least creating the tumult in China for the sake of talking to the president of Taiwan? Well, it's a little bit questionable, isn't it? Until you think about it. There were news reports and are news reports that the Donald Trump organization sent representatives 4 months ago to Taiwan to talk about a big resort in Taiwan. Or take a look at the president of Japan. One of the first conversations Donald Trump, president-elect, had with a foreign leader was with the president of Japan in the Trump Tower. Who was there with Donald Trump? His daughter, Ivanka. Well, that's nice. Until you realize that Ivanka is just on the verge of a major deal with a huge apparel company in Japan to take her designs, and that apparel company is owned by the Bank of Japan. And the Bank of Japan is wholly owned by the government of Japan. Do you see how problematic these things become? Or take, for example, his meeting with the president of Pakistan. Now, this was unscheduled. Certainly the State Department didn't know about it. This ruffled, in a big, big way, worried India. Now, India and Pakistan don't particularly like each other. They're both nuclear powers. You want to be very, very careful in terms of meeting with one or the other. Does Donald Trump have some financial interests in Pakistan? Why did he do this? Why did he, in one fell swoop, actually two fell swoops, he is ruffling, making angry China, making angry and upset and worrying India. I mean, you have over a third of the world's population that he has made a little bit uncomfortable. For what purpose? Not to mention, there is also the Dakota Access Pipeline. It turns out Donald Trump, according to yesterday's New York Times, Donald Trump has a financial interest in the company that owns the Dakota Access Pipeline. He says, oh, well, that's not affecting my decision that I want to go forward with the Dakota Access Pipeline when I am president. But how can we be sure? You see, that's the problem. We can't be. That's why Donald Trump has got to put all his financial interests in a blind trust, so he doesn't know how anything he is going to be doing affects those financial interests, and he can't rely on his family. Hello? Now, one more thing before I get to your questions, and that is what we know about Trumponomics. Trump's economics. How is he going to keep, he says, good jobs in the United States? Last week, he says he saved 800 Carrier air conditioner company jobs in Indiana. Well, that's what he says, 800 jobs, and I don't want to knock it. 800 jobs is better than no jobs. If he can stop Carrier from sending 800 jobs to Mexico, as they had planned to do, that's not nothing. These people will have a nice Christmas. But the cost of those jobs, the state of Indiana put in $7 million to save 800 jobs. And then you have the company that owns Carrier, is United Technologies. Now, just think about this for a minute. United Technologies, the company, the parent company of Carrier, has military contracts with the United States government, obviously, that last year alone totaled $6.8 billion. Now we're talking about billion dollars, $6.8 billion in 1 year, those military contracts. Donald Trump talks to United Technologies, and you can bet Donald Trump is talking about those military contracts. And he is also promising, remember, a huge military buildup. So if you are the executives of United Technologies, what are you going to do with regard to Donald Trump's request to keep jobs? And by the way, they didn't keep all 2,000 jobs in Indiana. They kept 800. And there's one more thing, and that is corporate tax cuts. Donald Trump is talking about big corporate tax cuts, including the fact that companies that have their savings abroad, their cash abroad, United Technologies has $6 billion parked abroad in low tax jurisdictions. He is going to, he says, Donald Trump, have those companies bring that money back and face a very, very low U.S. tax, a tax holiday, a special amnesty for those companies. So here we have Donald Trump. Where's my orange marker? We always need the orange marker. Donald Trump, the President-elect of the United States. What is his policy? What is his Trumponomics? What does Trumponomics actually mean in terms of saving American jobs? It means giving big companies special deals. Special deals in terms of millions of dollars of tax cuts at the state level, in terms of government contracts, and big corporate tax write-offs in terms of their federal taxes. That's called trickle-down economics. We've tried that. That might save a few jobs, but at huge expenditures. Trickle-down economics, or trickle-down populism, because it's really a fake form of populism. It's kind of it's an idea that we've tried before. We tried it in the 1980s. We tried it under the George W. Bush administration. Trickle-down economics. Give people at the top big advantages, big benefits, big tax cuts, and expect that the benefits are going to trickle down to everybody else. Hello? They don't. Trickle-down economics is a cruel hoax. It's cruel because it doesn't work. It imposes huge costs on average people who have to pay to make up for the big tax benefits that people at the top make, and it widens inequality. Donald Trump says that he is going to drain the swamp of Washington. Well, trickle-down economics based on special tax breaks and special benefits to big corporations, that is filled with alligators. That puts more alligators and crocodiles and everything else into that swamp. It makes Washington even swampier. All right, your questions. And let's begin with the first question is from, where are you? We'll get your questions. Jeff Zarnetti, do you see any solution to ban fake news and propaganda sites from distributing damaging, quote, news stories involving politics? What can we do? Jeff, I think it is important for the social media, Facebook and others, to make sure that you know, and every other person who is dealing with social media, know that something that is portrayed or trying to portray itself as a real news site is not. I mean, you can distinguish between real news and just and fake news, and that distinction ought to be drawn. Kelly Tiemans, I'd really like to know about the viability of the Electoral College rising up on December 19th. Well, Kelly, I think it's unlikely, but as we saw, you have at least one elector whose conscience tells him that he cannot possibly go through with voting for Donald Trump, given what we know about Donald Trump's character, given his demagoguery, given Donald Trump's influence, apparent influence, with regard to foreign governments and his global financial interests. So will other electors follow? I certainly hope they do. But the chances, I don't think they're high. Karen Campos, isn't it true that Hillary cannot become president no matter the outcome of the recount because she conceded? Karen, no. There's no legal, nothing legally attaches to a concession speech. In fact, we have had at the state level, at the local level in American history, a lot of people who concede and then votes are recounted and it turns out that they've actually won. Walter Santana, what's the difference between trickle-down economics and supply-side economics? Walter, supply-side economics is essentially trickle-down economics. It's the same thing. The reason that many of us use the term trickle-down economics is because the contention, the conceit under supply-side economics is that if you give tax breaks and other benefits to people at the top and big corporations, those benefits will benefit everyone, creating more jobs and better jobs. And so those benefits, in a sense, are supposed to trickle down, but they don't. That's the point. Jeremy Gilbert, what do you think about Trump choosing Ben Carson as HUD secretary? Jeremy, Ben Carson has never held any public office before. He knows nothing about housing. He knows nothing about urban development, and he's against the Fair Housing Act. It seems to me those 4 points together make him unqualified. Lauren Smith, were you wearing a coat and hat this morning? It's not ever actually cold in Berkeley, is it? Lauren, it is, and it was. And I'll continue to wear a coat and hat. Tiffany Laundrie, my question is about reaching out to representatives. Should I only be calling the senators and representatives from my own state and district, or can I call senators from other states as well? I need a bit of direction. Tiffany, if you call a senator or a representative's office, and by the way, I do recommend writing a letter or calling. Both are very, very good. It's helpful if you tell the person you are speaking to that you are from that state or from that particular district. Then they will register it when they go to the senator or go to the representative, and they say, well, here's what we have had in terms of letters and telephone calls from your own constituents. David Grant, Republicans were very successful in redistricting after the 2010 census. How can we as Democrats prepare for 2020? David, one of the most important things we've got to do before 2020 is redistricting reform. Now, it is possible to do. Even in Republican states, there is a lot of precedent in terms of if you have a referendum option in your state, you can do what California did. And that was California had a referendum that on the ballot put redistricting and required that the decisions about the shape of the district be taken out from under the legislature and be given to an independent citizen commission. With also the direction in many states that those districts are contiguous, that they actually have a shape that is recognizable and justifiable. Mark Kaufman, can corporate taxes be better structured to benefit American productivity and employment and less directly benefit Wall Street? Mark, corporate taxes can be structured in any possible way you want. In other words, one thing we could do is provide in corporate taxes a tax break to companies that create net new jobs in the United States and a tax penalty on companies that essentially take their current jobs and create net new jobs abroad and reduce current jobs in the United States. We could also, and I've suggested this before, have a tax benefit for companies that have a small differential between highest paid CEOs and the typical American worker, and a tax penalty on companies that have a huge differential between the compensation of their CEOs and the average worker. Julie Oxenberg, did I pronounce it correctly, Julie? Can you explain why President Obama cannot appoint Merrick Garland before he leaves office, or if he could, why he doesn't appear to be doing so? Julie, there is such thing as a recess appointment. And that recess appointment, it is certainly possible for the President Obama, to make a recess appointment of a Supreme Court justice. But that recess appointment would only be very temporary. What happens in some recess appointments is that if you have the same executive, and that executive has a majority in the states, it happens in the states quite often, then that recess appointment can last longer. In fact, it can be the basis for a permanent appointment. But obviously that's not going to happen in this case. Joey Stevenson, will you adopt me? I cook. No. But thank you for the offer. Susan Lancelot, why do conservatives constantly complain about business regulations? Susan, they don't complain about business regulations, they like. In other words, there are a lot of regulations that keep out competitors. Some regulations are designed, I mean, look at all the occupational licensing regulations. Try to be a nurse midwife that has authority. Certainly, nurse midwives do and are able to deliver babies, but most states they are not allowed to because the doctors and the political power of the doctors keeps those nurse midwives away. In countless ways, regulations are used by businesses to control competition. So businesses don't dislike regulation per se. They like some regulations, they don't like other regulations. Derek Vandenberg, in your opinion, what do you see as the long-term consequences of Trump repealing regulations on the banking and financial industry? Derek, if they go along and go ahead with what they are planning, and Steve Mnuchin, who is the pick by Donald Trump to be the new Treasury Secretary, somebody who was a former partner at Goldman Sachs, Steve Mnuchin has said that one of the things that they will do, and he will do, is to pull back, to erode, to diminish the Dodd-Frank law, which is designed to prevent a repeat of the too-big-to-fail phenomenon we saw in 2008. So given that the banks today are much larger, the 5 biggest Wall Street banks today are twice as large in terms of assets than they were in 2008. If you get rid of Dodd-Frank or even scale it back, as Mnuchin wants to do, you are inviting another Dodd-Frank, pre-Dodd-Frank, too big to fail crisis. And this crisis, by the way, even with Dodd-Frank is not enough. You've got to break up the biggest banks. In fact, this is another piece of evidence, by the way, that Donald Trump is not a populist. He's not on the side of American workers. Donald Trump is an oligarch. Look at the people he's appointing. The wealthiest cabinet in American history, and most of these people want to reduce regulations that businesses don't want. Most of them want to cut taxes, repeal not only Dodd-Frank, repeal Obamacare. I mean, basically do everything that the oligarchy, the powerful and privileged in this country, want. Dora Victor, there are so many issues that require our attention. Fracking, global warming, social inequity, privatized prison system, etc. What do you believe is the most important? Dora, I think the predicate, the predecessor, the necessary precondition for dealing with any of the issues we care about is getting our democracy back, getting big money out of politics, which is why I'm chairman of a wonderful group called Common Cause, which for 40 years has been trying to get big money out of politics. That's the fight that is at the center of Common Cause. And why I'm so concerned about what's happening to our democracy through especially Donald Trump. I mean, the conflicts of interest are just the tip of a huge iceberg. Donald Trump and the Republicans want to get rid of the few regulations that are left with regard to restraining money in politics. They don't want to reverse Citizens United. In fact, Donald Trump has been very clear he is not going to appoint or nominate a Supreme Court justice that wants to reverse Citizens United. This administration is an administration by, for, and of the wealthiest and most powerful interests in this country. And so, to me, We can't do a thing unless we are getting our democracy back, and the democracy movement is the most important movement you can join right now, regardless of what you care about. Dave Jacob, you look really weary. Dave, I'm not weary. I'm just, I'm getting sleep. You seem to have lost your pep. What? David, I have pep. I like many of you, was shocked and dismayed 3.5 weeks ago, almost 4 weeks ago, by what happened. The election of Donald Trump. I really did not believe it was possible. I didn't think it was going to happen. I still, to this day, do not believe that most Trump voters voted for hatefulness or voted for prejudice or racism or homophobia or misogyny or xenophobia. No, I think most people who voted for Trump, and I think they're misguided, but I respect them, I think they voted because they feel like the system is rigged. The system is basically not a system, a political economic system that responds to the needs of most people. And so the Trump election, in large part, not entirely, but in large part, I believe is part of this, the same anti-establishment wave that Bernie Sanders was part of. So yes, I was tired, I was a little exhausted, I was a little despairing, but I'm bouncing back. Can't you see? Okay, and one other note, please join us for a special live broadcast Friday for a behind-the-scenes look at Inequality Media. We're going to be on Friday doing some filming of some more of our videos, and you can be behind the scenes. We're going to take you behind the scenes because those videos are the real ways in which we communicate complicated policy issues to all of you. They're short, usually about 2.5 minutes. Thank you, many of you who've already contributed some of your hard-earned money to help us continue those videos. And thank you for something much more broadly based. I talked to Bernie Sanders. He was stopping through town last Friday, and we met briefly. And Bernie and his wonderful wife Jane, and we talked about the future of American politics. And Bernie said something that I think is very important. He said to me, the biggest silver lining on this dark Trump cloud that is coming over America is that it's going to get even more people, more progressives, more people who weren't even progressive before, to become more activist. In favor of our democracy, in favor of reversing inequality, reversing climate change. In other words, maybe one way to read what's about to happen to us after January 20th, although it is horrible, and I don't want to dress it up as anything but horrible, and certainly do not normalize this coming presidency. This is not normal. In fact, I really do think Donald Trump himself is a pathological narcissist and worse. But one way of viewing it is to say this is going to cause the people to rise up even more, and you and your friends and associates and family to become even more activist. And I like to think that in our little tiny way here at Inequality Media, given our videos and our presentations to you and live broadcasts like this, we are helping you become a bit more activist. So don't despair. I have my energy back. I did lose energy a little bit, but we have a lot to do. We have a lot in front of us. There is a great challenge before us. I want to, just as I do, I want to thank again these wonderful people who are thousands of you sitting back there, especially Zoe Umlaut Beck and Jobin Gill, who just put on 9 to 5, our theme song. And Jobin, you can do that again. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you, well, you know what? We will see you next week at this time. See you Friday. And also, for those of you who want to tune in, we're doing little 5-minute sessions around 5 p.m. Pacific. And 8 p.m. On the East Coast. Just 5-minute summaries of kind of the Trump outrage of the day. If you want to tune in, we'll do whatever we can to help and keep your sanity. Bye.